How you going, brothers? And the occasional sister, welcome to the Broadshoot Club. The bloody rats here are eating me out of home and garden, literally. They've taken all my strawberries. I haven't harvested more than probably a handful of strawberries. They've chewed all my chilies, so I haven't harvested any chilies. I set 2 of those last night and they both went off, catching me 2 fat rats. You can see where the rats have been chewing my kale, but also, if you look at my chilies on the ground down there, they chew them off and just leave them. Rats have done that. What amazes me is these traps went off and both rats got out, but they were dead beside the trap. This stuff here, they just chewed right through that. The rats also decimated my snow peas. Look at that big hole there. They've dug them all up and they've all completely gone. They've buggered it. So I'm putting another trap in there. Going to put that down. Hopefully we get them today because I saw them running across there before. We'll head on down here. There's an upstairs in this place too. That's for an extra bed if someone's staying here. That's us. Okay, we're down the Motueka River where I had a hut where I was living. A nice little hut with a tarpaulin for a roof, fireplace, place you could hang your meat, an old whitebait net or your eel. In the case today, I had my inaki out and I caught 3 beauties. Now I've met this family of Maori living up the river a bit further. And I hadn't spoken much to them. All I knew was they spoke Maori. They came from the North Island. They were Tuhoi was their tribe. And they'd been trying to catch some eel and they caught nothing. And today I had 3 and I thought, you know, it'd be really nice if I smoke these up and take it up to the family up there. So that's what I went about doing. So I had a big pot that I used to put the eel in to get the slime off. Big cast iron. And what I'd do is I'd heat it up so it was boiling. I'd spike the eel so it was dead. Throw it in, head and all, into the pot, and it's dead, but it still moves around. They move around this hot pot. You'd give them 1 minute in there, take them out, and that way you'd run your knife down the body of the eel, and all the slime would just go white and come off clean. Turn it over, so now you've got a clean skinned eel. Then you whip the guts out, and I had the smoker that I made out of an old fridge that had been dumped down there. I'd taken all the guts out of it, and it wasn't the hot smoker and it wasn't the cold smoker. It just gave you a nice sort of mix between. I didn't have any sugar, and I didn't have any honey or anything to make it sweet. All I had was the salt water from the sea, which I'd use, and that there was my way of doing it. I'd have the salt water, I'd leave it on a tray all day, and eventually the sea would evaporate and you get a light misting of salt, because I was right next to the sea, and that was what I do. So I had my tray there, and what my tray was an old, it was a tray like this big. It was actually the bottom of a shower that somebody had, and I just put the plug in. And it was stainless steel, so it was also really good for like doing fish and stuff on it. So it was one of my things that I had scrounged. Someone had actually dumped it. A lot of people stayed down there during the whitebait season and they'd leave stuff down there. So that was one of my assets that I'd use, and it was also back up as a sink. So I'd have my salt in there, and I'd evaporated the salt just by letting the sun do its stuff over a period of days. And you had to have the hot weather for doing it, and you'd end up with it like a powder. So we'd roll the eel in that, hang it into the smoker after I'd done the preparation, and get my manuka going and everything. And it would take about 3 hours. So it wasn't really a hot smoke because it was take a lot longer. A hot smoke, you'd normally cook it in 20 minutes. This would be about a 3-hour process, but it would be absolutely delicious. So I had my eel, and by lunchtime it was ready, and I went back down to the camp with these 3 eel, all on a nice harakiki mat that I'd made, that's flax. And I went down carrying it. This old guy came out and he didn't speak any English to me at all. He just come out and said some words in Maori, which I didn't understand, so I just held this out to him. And his whole face, he had no teeth lit up. He gave me a big gummy smile. And nodded his head, and I said, it's for you guys. And then the young guy came out, one of the young guys I'd seen before, and he had a tracksuit on him. He come out and he looked all sort of like, what are you doing here, bro? And I sort of, well, I gave you guys some eel. And he was like, oh, come over to our fire. So I sat down by the fire, and we ate a little bit of eel, and then they got some damper going. That's just basically some flour and water. And they had this tin of golden syrup we were dipping it into out of our sticks, and I was thinking, geez, if I'd only had a bit of that golden syrup to put on the eel to smoke, it would have been really good. Would have gone well with the sea salt. But we're feasting on that and talking, and the guys were really enjoying it. We ate one whole big eel in one sitting. There was 2 more. I said, you keep those for later. And it keeps a wild smoked eel. And one of the older guys, he was at his 30s, he said, we're going to go down to the post office pub tonight. If you want to come down, we'll buy you a drink. And I said, hell yeah, man, because I had no money. So that night I was down the post office pub, and when I was down there I met my mate Kieth, Barry, Tish, and these three Maori guys at the bar, and they bought me a big pint, and I remember sitting in this big pint. I'm only 16 years of age, sitting there with a pint, got halfway through it and started to feel my ears go warm and all tingly and feeling good. It's real buzzy. And Barry leans over to me, he goes, I was talking to the farmer up at Marshel. And I said, oh yeah? He said, yeah. He said, yesterday there was a big boar in his paddock. I said, well, last time I went up across his farm, he taxed my 2 pigs that I caught. He says, yeah, I know. He's told me that. He knows exactly who you are. But he said to pass on to you, if you want to go up, you can have a crack at this boar. I said, really? He goes, yeah. So that's a bit weird. Last time he didn't want to know about me and he stole me pork. He says, no. You go up there and you can do that. I thought, okay, fair enough. And so we're sitting there and drink starting to work. And I didn't have a car or anything. And it's to get to Marshel from my place with my dog Frosty was pretty much impossible. Kieth was at the bar and Kieth had been listening to everything. And he said to me, bro, I got to work tomorrow. I'm working not far from you. I'll go back to your place tonight and you can have the car in the morning. So that night, Kieth and I went back and in the morning got up super early with Frosty. I didn't have his other dog. He had a good dog Spot, but that was actually in the pound at the time, so we couldn't get that out. So me and Frosty and Kieth went down the road like 5 in the morning. It's dark, it's winter, it's freezing cold. And I dropped him off at Lotta Lane where he was working. And I took his car and carried on to Marshel. Now I went in the paddock early in the morning and there was no pig anywhere. There was nothing at all. And it was like still dark and I was there in the farmer's paddock looking around and the lights were still off in the farmhouse. There was nothing at all. And Frosty sniffed around everywhere and I spent about 2 hours and come out a bit disillusioned and thought, oh yeah. Oh well, I'll go up to the national park and see if I can actually get onto something else. Went up the inline track. Got up probably about a good kilometre and Frosty shot up the track and then he came back like looking all sort of weird as if he'd done something naughty. And I don't know what had happened and got further up track. Don't know what that was about. It was like he had his ears back, come up the track, and when I got back further there was a bloody a wasp hive. Now normally in the winter wasps aren't a problem. Normally in the summer they are, but what had happened is this hive, he obviously got a sting off it and he got stung, and I was real careful to keep away from that. So instead of going on the track, I decided I'd go up on the bank and I'd go up the ridge line. We're walking up this ridge line and this yearling popped out. And it looked at Frosty and looked at me and it must have thought that Frosty was his mother because it didn't run away. It started to walk towards us. And some of you guys that hunt will know this can happen sometimes. It was sort of looking at us and I went, meh, meh, like its mother. And it came forward, meh, meh. And Frosty was like, looking at me. Now, I never encourage him to chase anything but pigs, but in this particular case, I thought if we're not going to go home with pork, we're going to go home with some venison. And he's like, and I only had to say it once. I went, meh, and the deer came back more forward, and I went to Frosty, went, get it. And Frosty just went, ping, and he went flying full noise at this deer, and the deer just looked at the track, looked at him, and suddenly realised it was a bad idea, turned and started to run, and Frosty literally ran from behind, jumped on its ass, like up on its ass, and bulldogged it around the neck, and went flying over, and this deer was thrashing around. It's a yearling, so it's still quite big. I went sprinting up the track, and sprinting up, and there was a big old Carnuka root across the track, and I tripped over as I was going up, went straight down on my face. I was half stunned. I actually remember putting my head up, and there was literally stars. I'd knocked myself a real beauty. I don't know where it hit myself in the head because I didn't feel anything. Everything was just numb. But all I knew was I had to get to this bloody deer. So now I'm a bit groggy and I'm further up the track. I grab a back leg and this other back leg is kicking the hell out of me. I'm getting kicked. So now I get a kick in the head from the deer and I've got a kick. Now, after all this had happened, I had like a golf ball size in the front of my head. And to this day, I don't know whether it was a deer that did it or when I went down on the Manuka route, but I had like a big golf ball in my head. Anyway, I finally got this bloody thing, got a front leg, and got my knife into it, and killed it. Great piece of meat, great story to tell all the boys back at the pub, except they had a bit of a bad ending. We're coming back down the track there, and I've got this Morris Minor of Kieth back at Marshel, and back there in the track, and I'm got this like thumping headache, and I'm tying it up. And then the Marshel boys come out. Now, when I say the Marshel boys, I'm changing the name because these guys are still alive today. And that was a code name that we used when we were talking about them in the pub or anywhere, because they were the enemy of my mate Mal. They were the guys that ripped off all of his merchandise, let's call it that for the sake of this video. They were the guys that had stolen from him, and he'd stolen from them. He'd used Frosty to go back and sniff out where their patch was, and he'd waited and he'd stolen their gear. So these guys hated Mal, and they knew I worked for Mal, and they also knew that Kieth worked for Mal, and it was a rivalry always going on. And when I got back there, the two Marshel boys, they were by the car as I was tying up. One piped up, and these guys are skinheads. They used to sell all of their merchandise to a gang called the Road Knights that were in Timaru, down Southmore. And they come up to me as I was putting this deer on the bonnet, and they're like 18, 19 years of age, and I'm 16, so they're bigger than me. And the bigger one of the two goes up and goes, "Nice bit of meat." And I went, "Yep." I knew what was coming up. And he just put his hands on it and lifted it off the bonnet and said, "Thanks." And I said, "It's not for you." And the other guy, this little short guy, just gave me a push in the chest and said, "Fuck off." And I said, "That's not for you, that's mine." He says, "Fuck off." And the other guy was like, "Get out before we give you a hiding." So I lost my deer. I was absolutely gutted. I actually cried. I can't believe I cried. I was in the car driving home crying. It shows you how I wasn't emotionally... I didn't get angry, I was crying. I still hadn't matured. I was still immature. I wasn't a mature man. I was still a pussy. And still, I got shaken by that. And so anyway, I was going back to take, up to Lotta Lane to take the car back to Kieth. And he was already at work now. It was about probably, I don't know, 11 o'clock mid-morning. And Kieth's working for this guy on Lotta Lane who's connected with Mel. And dropped the car off, and he took one look at me, and he didn't say anything, he just looked at me. He's like, and I said, "Oh bro, I've had a bad morning." He didn't say, "Yeah, what happened?" I told him what happened, and I saw his face go like this. He was nodding his head, and I was thinking, he's hatching a plan. And I just had completely no idea whether he was like thinking I'm an idiot for letting him take it. Is he going to do something about it? I couldn't read his body language, and I went back to the hut, left his car there, walked back to the hut with nothing, and thought nothing more of it. Now the Marshel boys, they lived in another place on the other side of, not far from where we were. They're in a house. It's like a gang sort of house, like you could say. And they've got affiliations with a gang called the Harrises, I think, in Christchurch, and also the Road Knights in Timaru. So you don't go near there, around there. But this story I'm going to tell you now is second hand. This is a story that I got from my mate Barry. Sorry to interrupt the story, brothers and the occasional sister, but I've just reset this trap again. I heard some squealing and the dog started barking. And look, we've now got 3 of the bastards. That was just while I was telling the story. So we put this down again. We might actually get a 4th one before we finish the story. Oh, it's bloody great to get those rats, and great to get a bit of rain too. Right, the last part of the story, the conclusion, which is a bit of a funny one. I'll try and get through this without laughing, because even when I think about it, it makes me laugh. So Barry took Kieth over to the Marshal's place to go and gather back my yearling that had been stolen from me. Barry said the first thing happened when they pulled up is they noticed the yearling was in the garage. For everybody driving past to see, they weren't scared about anybody coming and taking it. And you could understand that, because the Marshals were pretty violent, pretty hard-ass people. Keith's in his passenger chair, and they pull up beside it there, and Keith just gets out of the car, goes open and opens the front gate. It's got a bell on it, so it makes some noise as you go through. I guess it's their alarm system. Goes through the gate, goes straight over the garage, takes the deer off the hook, sticks it over his shoulder, and the front door goes flying open, and it's that little guy, the wee one that pushed me, the little skinhead, and he goes, "What the fuck are you doing?" And Keith just walks up the path, like, real chilled out, and the little guy comes up to me and goes, "Give that back!" So Keith nods his head, takes it off his shoulder, and passes it to the little guy, and the little guy's now got the deer, he's holding it, and Keith walks up to him real close and goes, "Bang!" and he headbutts him right on the end of the nose. I still think it's hilarious when I even tell that story. Smashed him, KO'd him, out for the count. And as he went down, Keith grabbed the deer before old mate had hit the deck, and put it back up on his shoulder, looks down the ground, old mate's like rolling around with his nose, steps over him, walks over, Barry's got the boot of the car open, put the deer in the back, there's a bit of kerfuffle at the door, and Kieth couldn't give a fuck. Anyway, that's the story Barry told me. They come back to my place that night, and we got the deer, and we cut it up and put it in the meat safe, and had a bit of a laugh, had a brew, and the next day, or actually 2 days later, because the next day we went to a hangi, and I remember bringing a bit of that meat. The day after the hangi, Mel had come back from Australia. He just come back, and he'd heard this kerfuffle that had gone on, and he was really pissed off because he didn't want any friction with us and the Marshals. He didn't want any confrontational stuff, so he was like saying, "You boys have got to cut this out," and I could just see Kieth saying nothing. Kieth wasn't going to tolerate shit from anybody. Kieth's only 16 years of age, and these guys were older than him and bigger than him, but he was one of those guys. Yeah, there'll be more stories about Kieth. He wasn't really a mate, but he does feature on 2, possibly 3 more stories down the track where he came back into play again. But that's enough of this story today. I think the next story after this will be where we go to Wellington with Frosty. I keep on saying that, but that was a bit later on because it was just getting into summer now, the end of winter. And that's where things became interesting, to say the least. Some colourful, interesting characters when we went to Wellington. That'll be a good yarn. I think you'll enjoy that. The Bro Check Club is for brothers and the occasional sister to put solutions on the table to problems. If you've seen anything about my garden, and thanks for the tip about using plaster of Paris to poison rats. I have actually seen that before, 50% mixed with something else. So far, I think I'm going to stick with the traps because I've only put like 2 out, and already I've had 3 kills, and now I've got myself another 4 traps that I'm going to unpackage and set as well. So I'll actually have 6 traps. Those traps are really good. Make sure you get the traps that have got the kill. Interestingly, that 3rd rat also had got out of the trap after being killed, so they must get smacked on the back of the head and push themselves out with their front legs. So only way I can think of, but it's enough to kill them anyway. They're basically doing it over probably a reflex, and they're dead. Yep, that's me. Go steady during this mad season, and we'll have some more adventures of Frosty down the track. See you later. Right, oh, it's so good to have that bloody rain. It's really good because around here it's as dry as a ship's biscuit. Yeah, beautiful. It's coming down out there. Beauty. Really starting to come down. Oh, we want that. That's happy days. However, not good. Not good for the cherry farm. I'm just going to go down. That's the cherry farm there. And what it does is it makes all the cherries swell up and split. And they won't be happy about that at all. But for me, it's good for my garden. I can hear Patch down the paddock crying. I think she's lost a mate, Gary. There she goes, right in the middle of the paddock. And where the hell's Gary? He's nowhere to be seen. He's not with the sheep. Oh, there goes Gary there. He's calling to her now. They love each other, those two. Yeah, no, Gary's calling out to Patch. There goes Patch there. Bruce said that, one of you guys, Bruce, said that they're going to get bigger and they're going to climb over my fence and get into my tunnel house, and you'd be right. So we're going to decide whether they're going to go back to Lucas McDucas. We're going to put them in the freezer. Something's got to happen. I don't think I've got the heart to cut their throats and eat them. So I think they'll go back to Lucas. They're too sweet, aren't they? Oh, I've killed hundreds of goats, but these guys, I don't know. They've become my mates. I think I'm getting soft in my old age. Anyway, they found each other. Old Patch running up the hill. Yeah, she's good to see that rain on the paddock. That'll green it up a bit.